Ottawa and Alberta have shaken hands and made a deal, which includes a big-ticket item, a privately built and paid-for bitumen pipeline to the BC coast. Prime Minister Mark Carney and Premier Danielle Smith signed this much-anticipated memorandum of understanding yesterday, and the Premier says Indigenous Relations Minister Rajan Sawhney played a large and central role in negotiations and will be a key figure going forward as the province engages Indigenous communities, many of which oppose the pipeline. Now, Minister Sawnhey is on the line now. How much closer would you say a pipeline from Alberta to the northwest coast of BC is now than it was before this MOU?
Well, yesterday was a historic occasion, but make no mistake, there's still a lot of work to be done ahead. We have to submit an application to the Major Projects Office next year. And that's going to require a lot of engagement with Indigenous communities. It's going to require some technical work on behalf of, the engineering team. But nonetheless, this MOU opens the door. It makes it real in more cases. And we are going to be, me in particular, I'm going to be heading to BC next week to have some more conversations.
Okay, well, that sets the table nicely. I mean, the MOU says as much, that Canada and Alberta will engage in meaningful consultation with First Nations. How do you define meaningful, and how does that work start for you next week?
That's a really good question. So I just want to clarify that actual consultation takes place when a project application is submitted. But before then, there will be significant engagement. And that actually means me being on the ground, having face-to-face conversations. So I'll be traveling across the province, and I'll be in BC as well. I'll be working with the BC government as well while I'm out there to make sure that they're aware of the conversations that I'm having in the communities that I'm meeting with. But essentially, the nature of these conversations is going to be talking about environmental concerns, talking about economic benefits, and what backstop loans and guarantees can look like with the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation. There is a lot of interest, and there is definitely quiet support amongst Indigenous communities in BC.
So you'll hope to top the quiet support and make it a little louder, I'm sure. But there is also, as you no doubt recognize, some formidable opposition to the idea of piping bitumen to the northwest coast. There's an alliance of coastal First Nations that say a pipeline is, quote, never going to happen. How will you change their minds? What is the strategy in terms of engagement?
Of course, I respect their opinion, and they have good reason to have those concerns and those worries. And part of the conversation needs to be talking about the evolution of technology and innovation in pipeline safety. I think that is something that even the general public is not aware of. Trans Mountain is a great example of how pipelines can be built and how safety considerations can be discussed. They have an Indigenous Advisory Monitoring Committee actually that they work with where they discuss all of these issues. So I'm going to tap into some of that knowledge and make sure I really understand what the concerns are and again try to mitigate. I know that everybody is not going to be on board. We understand that, the route of the pipeline and ultimately the water and the land provide sustenance for these communities. So it's critically important that we really hear, that we really listen, and we really address those concerns. So at the moment, as I said, there is quiet support and there is some opposition, but there's also a flexibility and a willingness to speak. I know that those who have been in the media and who have expressed their concerns and said that they don't want to see a pipeline. I've spoken to some of them and they are very happy to have a conversation with me to discuss this further. So that is very hopeful, that's optimistic. And as I said, I'm going to be on the ground. I'll be in BC next week having some more conversations.
So the MOU says that, the federal government is willing to label this pipeline a project of national interest. That doesn't eliminate the need to, the duty to consult. But is it your understanding that then that means you don't need a unanimous blessing from the BC government and coastal Indigenous First Nations?
Yes, there is a legal duty to consult, absolutely. And we are certainly going to do everything we can to try to get as much support as possible. But because this is a project of national interest, there are certainly no vetoes with the government or with the communities. But again, that's not the goal, just to plow ahead and surge forward, it really is important to get support and buy-in from all the stakeholders and the rights holders at the table. And that is my primary job. The Premier has entrusted me with this to go out and build relationships and really have those technical and environmental conversations. And I'm very hopeful and somewhat confident as well that we are going to have more support at the table than anybody can anticipate at this point.
You talked about buy-in. I mean, that can be a metaphor when we're talking stakeholders. But in this case, the Prime Minister has also, and the Major Projects Office, and the terms of all of this have emphasized equity ownership for Indigenous organizations, Indigenous communities. How is that a tool for you? What do you expect co-ownership could or should look like in this case?
It's a very effective and productive tool. And in fact, the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation, which is a Crown corporation here in Alberta, has backstopped 8 projects, and it's about $750 million in loan guarantees. And these projects have resulted in significant revenues being accrued to the communities that have participated. So we have tangible evidence that it works and that it provides significant economic benefit. And the communities that I've been speaking to are also aware that this is an effective tool and want to understand how it can work and how they can also be equity owners in a bitumen pipeline. The federal government has emulated our program. We are actually the leader in the country with this sort of a program, and communities know. They know that this is a way, it's a pathway to have equity stakes in projects. So this is also going to be a significant part of the conversations that I'll be having, and I hope to have some Indigenous leaders with me from Alberta who are participating in some of these AIOC projects as well, because they can tell the story better than any of us can.
Now, on the matter of the government of British Columbia's objections, I know you're sort of managing now a specific part of this file, but what is your UCP government's strategy for trying to convince the Premier and others in BC that this is an acceptable idea?
Well, it's a long road ahead, but it's very important to work well with BC. We are partners in many projects, in the future and in the past. A lot of our natural gas comes from Alberta as it goes to the LNG terminals. LNG Canada, Cedar LNG will be operational in a couple of years. So, the partnership is long and deep, and my goal certainly is to work very closely with my counterpart in BC. And I know that the Premier and Premier Smith and Premier Eby have had some conversations. So that is our go forward strategy. We are neighbors. We've always been friendly neighbors, and we just have to move beyond some of the contentious issues of the last few days and find a pathway forward. And we're committed to doing that.
Yeah.